Hello, everybody. Welcome to yet another Architecture Talk Time with Sarah Colata. Today, we're going to talk about quite a fascinating topic, actually, for me. I've got Oliver Lowrie from Lowrie,
Ackroyd Lowrie.
Ackroyd Lowrie Architects, out of London, right?
Yep, we're based in East London.
Excellent. And what we're going to talk about is their fascination in the metaverse and also their projects, which are building with net zero technology and sustainable projects. So I'm really interested to sort of deep dive into that concept of how architecture practices are moving from delivering sustainability projects and building sustainably and now looking into also the future of the metaverse, because it's obviously on everyone's mind. We're talking a lot about the metaverse right now. It's become quite a hip topic, but what about sustainability, especially for those practices that really value sustainable delivery? So Ollie, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you doing?
I'm very good, thank you. Thank you very much for having me on the podcast. Very excited.
Awesome.
I have to
So
justify
tell
my
us,
position on this.
so tell us a little bit about you and the practice first, so we get to know you a bit.
So me and John Ackroyd set up Ackroyd Lowrie about 7 or 8 years ago. We've got about 30 people based in this cool warehouse in East London, which you can see a bit of. Anyway, it's quite fun. It's an old art gallery, so we've spent a lot of energy and time making it, doing it up, and it's like a kind of fun warehouse of, like, we've got lots of VR technology and kind of creative people. So it's a lovely place to work. Me and John met when we were at Archetype, and Archetype are a very pioneering, sustainable company. They sort of quite a lot of education projects, but they really were real pioneers of passive house and self-build. But like, sustainability was in their core, but it was specific. Like, a lot of it was about the kind of individual building performance. And so I think, I was there for sort of 10 years basically, and John was there for about 6 or 7. And we began working together kind of in our spare time and just discussing ideas. And I think one of the things that we thought was that Archetype were an amazing company that I would never criticize, but we felt that the scale of the problems in the world was such that dealing with it building by building wasn't really going to be the answer. And so therefore we wanted to deal with things at a city scale. And that was really the birth of our company, was that we were like, okay, can we build a company? Yes, it's not going to design cities to start with. We had to do a load of house extensions and, all the stuff you have to do in the middle. But our aim was to end up working at the scale of cities, and that involves politics and economics and stuff that's actually outside of architecture, but we find really interesting. So that's the trajectory of the company. We are now working on master plans, and I think one of the things that really I'm interested in at the moment is this idea of net zero master planning. So I think it's easy to make a building. Okay, look, nothing's that easy about net zero, but individually, if you take one building, and it's, as long as it's not a super tall building, and you put some renewables on it, like, it's not impossible to get it to be a version of zero carbon. And I think particularly if you exclude certain things, like travel to it. If you think about master planning, then you're like, well, it's you should really be thinking about how the sort of transport around the city works, and so net zero master planning and this kind of idea of like 15-minute cities is really interesting, and it's sort of it's kind of an emerging area of thought, and I think we're very keen to engage in it, and I think that's my fascination at the moment.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love the fact that you sort of taking it from the building to the master plan. And you say right now you're working on cities, and this was a focus of the practice for the last few years. So are you implementing cities that are net zeros, or attempting to, within the projects that you're delivering right now?
Yeah, so one of the master plans that we're working on in East London, we're working with a consultant specifically on how we can do net zero master planning. Like, I don't know that it's within our abilities to necessarily guarantee that is going to be the outcome, but it's certainly the conversation. So this is a master plan that it's on an existing industrial swathe of London, and so in London, if you're building on industrial sites, you have to replace that industrial. So there will be industrial elements of the master plan and residential. So you have this kind of hybrid it's a city scale project. It's it'll probably be around 1,000 residential units, but a lot of employment generating, facilities like in industry. There's a little town centre, and within that we've got a lot to play with. So, is there a possibility of using heat from the industrial to kind of heat the residential? Like, those are the sort of ideas that we're playing with. And can you have a town centre that provides for workspaces and actually school places? I mean, that's a big transport driver is the school run, and if you've got schools within that master plan, can that prevent people from actually having to drive to drop off the kids? Well, yes. So it's those ideas. Can we create this little town within East London on a sort of industrial site? And it's a really exciting project.
Sure. And it's really interesting because I know that London obviously is sustainably minded. I think a lot of investors within London and developers are looking actually to put their money into projects that face those issues and solve sustainability related issues through construction, and also like later on usability of spaces. So it's interesting and intriguing that, of course, you're looking into sort of doing that on that scale, and I'd love to see how that turns out. But I know that you recently have become very fascinated by the metaverse, and I'm understanding that journey sort of started with developing more and more VR technology in the projects that you've been working on previously. And so that's just sort of feels like a natural advancement to now be interested in the metaverse. But do you want to tell me a little bit more about that journey?
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite fun. It's quite a funny journey, I think, or the start of it's quite funny. So after we'd been running the business for a year, we decided we'd have this big party. Like, we didn't even know really that many people in the industry. So like my mum was there, my girlfriend, a load of our friends, it was sort of, and then some clients. And it was like a warehouse around the corner from this warehouse actually. And we just had a big party because that's sort of what we know how to do. And we had all of our models of the buildings there, like sort of with 3D. We had a 3D printer like whirring away, kind of printing a building because we were interested in that. We had images up, CGIs and stuff, and we were like, oh, wouldn't it be fun if people could actually walk through one of our projects? And we were like, why don't we so we went to this like secondhand game store and we bought like an Oculus Quest, I think it was, and then a PlayStation controller, and we just rigged it up to a desktop PC, and we had it hanging in this kind of like white sort of studio space, and then we projected then what people were seeing when they were in the 3D model. Cool. And honestly, it had a queue like of people all night wanting to go and walk around. And it was one of our projects that we were working on. It was a film and photographic studio. And so one of the people at the party was the client, and he went, wait, I want to have a go. And so he goes and he's like, why have you not shown me this before? Like, this is amazing. I can literally walk through the studio and see what it's going to be like. And also, I've got to say, there's so much stuff I want to change now that I've seen it. And we were like, oh my God, we're onto something here. Right. And the least sustainable thing that you can possibly do is build something wrong. Right. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to change it. And that, it doesn't matter if it's a building or a city, that's true. And so we've really pushed the VR thing. We were the first company to start using VR with planners. So in the UK, you have meeting, the planning process in the UK is anything but straightforward. But you have these pre-application meetings where you meet with the planners, and we would put the design officers into the VR headset. So we had one project as a hotel in Clapham, South London, where it was next to a listed building. We were going taller than the listed building, but the story was set right back, so you couldn't see it from the street. And walked into the meeting, and the design officer was like, "You're not having that extra story." And I was like, "Whoa, wait! Like, get in the VR, walk down the road in the conservation area, and tell me if you can see the mansard." And so he did it, and he walked down, and he went, "Actually, you're right, you can't see it." And so we got that extra story.
Wow.
So it started from a perspective of engaging with clients, but that came from a lot of the background that John, my business partner, did. Whilst the architect he did this research project doing post-occupancy evaluation on our buildings that actually we both worked on. So I'd sort of done the original design, he delivered it, and then he went back and did this 2-year study on like the energy levels and user satisfaction, etc. And it scored really well. It was in the top 5% of all buildings that have ever been studied in terms of user satisfaction, which is fantastic. But a lot of the feedback was like, why is this like this? Why is this like this? And it's because in a school, you're showing people plans who aren't used to reading plans, mm-hmm. and then expecting them to make informed decisions. And so we design schools now at AL, and we've had the head of the schools every time in the VR, and they've been, of all of our clients, the one to spend the longest time in there, because they really want to test and understand how these spaces are going to work together. And they're like, there's a bit of a bottleneck here. You know, when everybody leaves the lunch hall, they're going to all get stuck here. So something's happening on my computer. Sorry. So, you know, it's about trying to make sure that the design is right, because that's the most sustainable thing you can do. And you know, when it comes to the planners, then it's about making sure that they understand the proposal that we're going to have. And look, there's nowhere to hide in a 3D model. If you present CGIs, you're going to present all the best views to try and sell your scheme. And that's not really the point, because I don't want to sell a shit scheme, you know. Sorry, but I want the scheme to be, you know, good from all views. And so this is the bit that gets really interesting for me. So we've had multi-user VR since lockdown. We talked about it for years. Lockdown happened, and we were like, oh my God, we actually have to do this. So we've got 10 headsets in the office, and we all took one home, and then we worked out that we could all meet in the model. So we were then giving headsets to clients and meeting up with them in their model, walking around them. So you have an avatar, and they've got like headsets on our ones, so you can talk to each other. And we were in different buildings, meeting in the model space, which like that is the metaverse. Do you know what I mean? Like, I was saying before we started, people are going to cringe when they look back on the metaverse. People using this expression, the metaverse, in the same way that we once talked about surfing the internet, which now sounds very antiquated. I think the metaverse will sound antiquated. The internet will become the metaverse, or the metaverse will become the internet. It's just going to be the new experience of the internet. And there's nothing that I can do to stop that from happening. But what I can do is utilize the application of the internet in 3 dimensions to ensure that the buildings that we produce are better tested and are better, more, you know, when they're built, they're going to last better because more people have engaged with them and looked at the worst bits of them and tried to improve them. And so, you know, from where we were 2 years ago, you know, like it was 2 years ago exactly to this day when we had lockdown, and we worked out that we could have multiple people walk around and comment on our proposals in a 3D environment using an internet connection. That was already a very small metaverse. And now, like, I'm just so excited because I'm seeing this stuff come out. And I'm like, oh my God, like we can put our model into like I don't know. I'm going to give away the thing that we're doing that is really cool, but we haven't done yet, which is that we're going to do the first public consultation on using the metaverse. So we're going to allow people to come and experience our buildings open source. And so we're going to do it for a site that we've bought. So with a client, so we've invested in a site in Harlow, and so we're going to do our public consultation using the metaverse. I mean, I have no idea if anybody's going to come or use it. You can come and give your opinion.
I definitely will.
as a non-resident of Harlow, I'm not sure that your opinion is going to carry as much weight as the people from Harlow, but like that's the application that gets me excited, and this is why I can square off the sustainability argument about the metaverse. I'm less interested in the NFT based, like the sandbox and Decentraland, where the land has a value and it's being speculated upon. I mean, that's interesting if it's interesting to our clients, and certainly our clients are very interested in investing in it and acquiring value through the application of blockchain technology to digital land, basically. But that's not the exciting bit for me. The exciting bit for me is this more open source version. So we're using Spatial for our experimental public consultation event, which has its limitations, but at the end of the day, it's free and you can use it on your phone. And so we already, during lockdown, we did a public consultation event for a school, and we used QR codes on. So we had like an internet page, and it had a QR code on it, and then you held your phone up, and you could then walk around like our model on your phone, and it made your phone into like a VR headset. And I was like, that's fucking cool. Like that was, we were really excited about that. But it was actually, it was a series of renders that were like spherical. So you weren't really walking around. You were just moving from one view to the next to the next. Now with Spatial, I've got it on my phone and I can just zoom around my building on my phone. That's amazing, And if I'm a user or a potential occupant of a building, and I can just do that so easily, the quality, I want things to be tested as much as possible. And this is the application of the metaverse that is really exciting, is that we get to road test at 1-to-1 scale, mass test a building before we've had to lay a single brick. And that's ultimately the most sustainable thing that we can do, I think, is to get it right when we do it.
Absolutely. I mean, something that I love about these stories, and it just really keeps me kind of going and imagining, because from a business perspective, I think giving that sort of experiential element to your clients or potential clients can be huge. I just imagined, when you were talking about that gallery room, when you had a headset attached in that queue of people, and when do you ever get a potential client or a person coming into architecture studio and being able to sort of really feel into the building and what it would be like? And this is not only fun, it's this element of like a little bit of like entertainment, I'd say, almost, like when you get into these like flight simulators, you're just actually sitting in a cabin flying a plane. It's a bit like that, but it has that sort of business aspect to it. Like, oh, since I've experienced it and I liked it, and it became like this company brought it so much closer to me to provide me with that experience. Is this something that sticks to me enough that, when I'm making a buying decision for hiring an architect, I'm going to call them back? And I think it's quite an interesting element also for that interaction with clients, because if you think about it, like obviously, and with every single project, you have sort of a community in London or outside, wherever that is, that you want to engage with, with the experience of the building, understanding a little bit who these people are, how they're going to be occupying the building and all that stuff. So getting that feedback is super crucial for architects. And I think giving them that experience also can spark conversations that actually betters your design and makes you and them jointly, part of the design and the participation. So it's really great. Like when you shared all that, I just really thought about the experience of the customer and how that journey is enhanced by you offering that additional service. And then obviously
we offer it for free, and we do that because we get a huge I don't mean to interrupt, but completely to agree with your point, we get a huge buy-in from like a very early stage in the project when we, particularly with end users, like with developers it's sort of less relevant, right? Because the buy-in for them is only really the success at planning application or whatever. That's their outcome. When it's an end user, so film, photographic studio or school, the client's there, we will show them a couple of different versions early doors, and the one that they pick once they've been through the VR really sticks, and for us as a business, the thing that costs us money is when we have to make late changes. So mostly if we just run everything through to the fee proposal, we'll make the margin that we anticipate. When that goes wrong is when somebody changes their mind late on and you can't really recharge them, so you're just like, oh, sod it, we'll just take the hit. So with the VR, we get much greater buy-in from the client early doors, and it doesn't then change as much. And that's why we offer it for free, is because it usually cements the design earlier. You have those harder conversations earlier in the process, and then it sticks because they've really walked around it, and it feels like it's theirs. So I totally agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. And then obviously also that sort of extension of the experience of your design and of your product, and by that also the brand that you're creating through all these applications. So it almost makes you question the purpose behind a website, for example, right? So before we had websites, we used business cards. I don't know, it's something that we don't do anymore for environmental purposes, but also because people lose them, stash them somewhere in their wallets, never put it out. It's just that sort of thing. Whilst websites, as great as they seem right now and they serve their purpose, that sort of concept of how we experience a certain brand through the website will also change with the metaverse and like advancement of technology. And perhaps right now we can't imagine exactly where it's going to go, but certainly it will become a little bit more three-dimensional. I think it makes almost a stronger imprint to experience a building through an app, on your phone, understanding a little bit like the principles that you implemented in the design. So therefore actually understanding your vision, rather than going on a website and reading about this and, about us section, our projects, 2D pictures, da-da-da. And so that again sort of takes me to that sort of idea of a metaverse and its service or its usage that we can have in the future, is that how we know technology and how we know communicating our brands right now through the internet and through the websites might change. It might change into something more experiential. And if you're an early adopter of it, or if you see this as a possibility for your business, it can be extremely powerful actually for creating a stronger communication with your clients. And I kind of see from the experience of how you're advancing with this technology, the value already created where you're at. And now imagining that you could actually have that experience just at a click or a scan of a QR code, right? And people going in. It sounds almost more powerful than having a website.
So part of what we're doing is we're building our office as well, like a metaverse office. But again, not in one of the ones where you have to where you require the blockchain sort of purchasing. So in terms of the sustainability element, and I know this is where the things get a bit I don't know, like just unjustifiable, is like most NFTs in the way that the blockchain is like in the way you have to transact for them via blockchains are hugely unsustainable, because it's like that processing power, which is just like wasted energy. That's not the office that we want. We want the open source one that is essentially, I mean, yes, there's a file that lives on a server somewhere, but we've got a whole server is on the cloud. So, we've got a lot of 3D models that live on our server, and I mean, yes, we should probably question that, but like what we're doing with our metaverse application is no greater than just storing a file online.
Mm-hmm.
We're not using blockchains to underpin that office. We want it to be an open source office.
Yeah.
And again, that's because we want people to be able to come via either a phone or a desktop or a VR headset and engage with us in this space, so that we can, start conversations with people that aren't immediately around us in London.
No, absolutely. And, also I was thinking about that whole idea of generally being conscious around sustainability in the digital era. And there's a lot of things that we don't often talk about. Storing files is certainly like a lot of data out there that can account to perhaps some kind of CO2 emissions. And, probably the numbers, if you put them together, are staggering. But I remember in the past I was having a conversation with this group of graphic designers that was actually helping me with my branding. And they said that with every single email that we send, there is a certain wastage of CO2. And I think that over 20 emails, it accounts to a cup of coffee. So when you start staggering then those kind of cups of coffees, you actually realize that it accounts to a lot of money per month. And so that sort of mindless, like, sending of emails back and forth with one word in there. How many companies around the world are doing that? And then, so I think that generally we just stepped into this sort of space where technology is surrounding us. Yes, there's a lot of things about it that are not sustainable, but can we actually stop it? Because if we're going to be resisting this, it's not really going to us, and by us I mean architects, because I find our industry a little bit of a dinosaur kind, a little bit traditional, a little bit resistant to change, even though we're actually studying innovation, and in many ways our designers were supposed to be like taking inspiration from new things and stuff like that. Actually, I find that all in all, as an industry, we're more on the traditional side.
100%. We're trying to disrupt it, and it's because it's just rife for disruption. But not just architecture, the whole property industry. I mean, it just is like antiquated. I don't know, particularly in the UK. NFTs have a place, and that is actually to serve as digital way of processing land, like real land, because that makes a lot of sense. Like the land registry in the UK is, I mean, honestly, it's like Victorian. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And they've just got like, the thickness of the boundary is like, it's a meter thick, because it's all drawn at like 1 to 1250, and with a red pen by a person with a red pen. And like that, then, when you look at it, you're like, oh my God, the boundary is like a meter wide if you apply it. So like using NFTs or blockchain technology for the purposes of processing land, it just seems so obvious it must happen. But like we've tried to be disruptive in lots and lots of ways, and I find that we are, like, the way that we think about the world is to try and solve problems in new ways, right? Because that's kind of what architecture teaches you to do. But then I find mostly that architects are like, oh no, but this is the way that you do it. I'm like, well, I don't care what the way is that you do it. I think that's a stupid way, and that's the way that we've always tried to be, is like to, sometimes that is the correct way, but you might as well try and think about solving the problem rather than just doing it in the way that everybody else has always done it. And I do think we're an industry that does that quite a lot.
So let me ask you a question. Do you think that with sort of the world moving towards the metaverse, architects are going to reduce their value and now be looking at fully joining the digital craze and designing only for the digital realm? Or is this something that we should look at more from a perspective of like merging? So yes, we're still building physical, which is what we're meant to do. This is our role in the society. However, sort of using, and I think you've given enough examples of ways in which we can enhance our services and enhance our projects, but actually having that digital presence as well, for the experiential purpose, for the purpose of selling those ideas, for the purpose of dividing land, and many more, I'm sure. Because after all, if you think about it, land, real estate, everything we do as well in the physical realm is actually for the business. It's either to sell, for mortgage, or to rent. And so therefore, these sort of applications of, again, reselling or renting spaces and land are going to be applicable in the metaverse too, and in the digital realm of the experience of architecture. And so it just gives more possibilities as well. So what do you think about that? Like, how
brands require architects to design things for the metaverse, where probably video game designers will be better. Because, but I reckon that video game designers probably won't be very good at designing stuff in the real world.
Yeah.
So like, I think, you know, there's going to be, I think there needs to be a merging of a sort of architect and digital, you know, people that specialize in digital environments to produce experiences for retail brands in the metaverse. Like, that needs to happen. Is that the thing that I'm interested in? Not really, but like, there is definitely an opportunity there. I'm more interested in the application of, like, in how we can enhance our experience of what happens in the real world via the technology that is offered by the metaverse.
Right.
Or like any technology. I mean, that's the purpose. We set up the company to try and disrupt the industry by using technology to create better worlds, like real worlds, not metaverse worlds. They happen to be a tool that we might be able to use to make the real world better. I mean, that's our top line, right? So our top line is we're building a company that defines the future of cities. And that comes in two halves. So we have to build a company, and that company has to define the future of cities. And like, that together is our like North Star, and everything needs to come back to that. So for me, the metaverse is one tool that will help us, but it's either got to help us build a company or deliver the cities of the future, right? Because that's ultimately what we're trying to achieve. And I think that allows us to, like any other tool, like CAD or SketchUp or, you know, ArchiCAD or whatever, they're all tools that will help us. But it's about building real world experiences for people that put humans at the heart of the city. That's our like next line down.
Yeah. And so I think that perhaps it's fair to say that this idea that now with the presence of a metaverse, architects need to change the role and become digital architects, where basically it's very similar to being a gaming designer. It's wrong. It's a misunderstanding. It's a misconception.
People can do that. Yeah, Zaha, I think, you know, jumped straight on that bandwagon, and probably rightly so, because that's sort of the, you know, like the lack of gravity, I think, helps with their building design. There definitely is a place for people that want to do that. That's not what I want to use it for, but I do think there is a legitimate way that you will be able to make money doing that.
I think that having a lot of conversations also with some of the speakers of Disrupt, sort of in the backstage of organizing everything, I asked pretty much everyone what they think about the metaverse, because it's a big topic. And, you know, I've learned my lesson about early adoption after crypto, blockchain, and everything else coming out. And I haven't jumped on that wagon. Even when, you know, social media had better algorithms, I wasn't there. And, you know, today we have people that have like millions of following, just because they started a year earlier. So all that stuff really shows to prove that there is some power in being an early adopter. And I think that a lot of architects today are looking into this topic just to understand their role and how that can actually enhance their businesses. But I do think that too many people analyze that prospect as something that perhaps it's forcing you to change from physical to digital. And I think it's a little bit like when we started to get access to like Grasshopper, Parametric, and other programs like this, where we can actually, yes, we can design surreal structures that perhaps you would never be able to engineer in a real life. And you can move into that realm and play with it, but you can also use that for environmental simulation to understand the movement of sound and to enhance your designs. And so therefore, how can we actually draw inspiration from practices like yours, Ollie, where, you know, we're looking at what is the practical application of these new tools, whether it's VR or, again, the metaverse or NFT and all these topics, to what I'm doing currently to enhance the experience of my clients, the communication of the project and the brand with the clients, and also essentially the better delivery. So cutting costs on improvements, late adjustments of designs and all that stuff that we talked about. I think this for me is certainly very inspirational. And I think it's the first time I've heard of such ideas, even though, like, obviously VR and all that technology is not new. It didn't just pop yesterday. But it's great to hear that you guys have had experience delivering that. So what is next for you guys? Like, what is the next step, especially in the respect of sort of the metaverse topic? Are you guys developing some new exciting things?
Well, yes, we haven't done our metaverse public consultation yet. It's taking a lot longer to build the model than we thought it would. And you can only use 8 different materials, which is really limiting. But that's definitely the next thing, is to be the pioneers of using the metaverse in this specific way, which is to test ideas. And I think that we'll hopefully get some press around that. Back in the real world, I mean, we work to a sort of 5-year plan with like 1 year kind of increments, and so it's like we want to work at a city scale, and so now we are trying to consolidate the city scale projects that we have and publicize that that's what we're doing. Like I said, 6-7 years ago we were designing house extensions, and now we're designing whole bits of city, and that's been a process where we've planned out what needs to happen along the way to get to the next point. And so we are now only starting really to work at the scale that we originally wanted to work at. So the next step for us is to become known at that scale. And that takes a lot of work. So I think that's our next thing.
Yeah. I was just thinking, with sort of the BIM technology and a lot of that technology that already allows you to scan a building and experience it online or through the computer, through digital. We talk a lot about digital twins and sort of the experience of the digital. Do you think that there could be also a business application of selling? Because I've seen that a lot of practices, or not maybe practices, but businesses do that. Release an NFT, but then also send you a physical thing. So you buy a Prada or Gucci NFT, and then you get a statuette or a little sculpture or whatever piece of art in a post too, which basically has the same code and whatnot, and it's that NFT. So you have the sort of physical element and the digital. Do you think that could be somehow a way to deliver projects in the future, where we actually give access in the metaverse to the digital model of the building also for clients?
Yeah, I think there's 2 really interesting ways that could work. So one, I think you could, this is one of the ideas that I'm again excited by, is that you could fund buildings. So you could fund a real life building. So say somebody like me buys a site and I go, okay, I want to raise development funding. I could auction off, sell tokens which have a real life value when I build the building, for people to invest in the building, right? So, in the same way that normal investment would work, but you could be using blockchain to ensure, to essentially guarantee their money against, instead of using the land registry and a charge, which is like the legal form that you would do in the UK, you sell a blockchain which is actually attributed to the piece of land in question, and then the building, once the building's finished, and then you could, that would gain value, and you could, use blockchain technology or an NFT to give the person the value back at the end. So that's quite exciting. And then I think that the next version on from that would be, the NFT would be a 3-dimensional digital twin, which is kind of what you're talking about. So you have a real bit of land, then you have a digital twin, and that digital twin is the NFT, which holds the value of the real building. That's like the sort of, it's like the 3D land registry with blockchain technology, which I think would be amazing and is probably some way off, but somebody should do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been recently talking to a friend of mine who runs a company called Integrated Projects out of New York, and they do reality capture. And he actually was interviewed as well, Jose, interviewed on this podcast. And we were talking about how they get commissioned by different clients to actually scan their buildings in BIM. And so he had a think Renzo Pianos or one of these big architects building, where the client actually asked them to rescan it. And I was thinking, I'm sure the architects have already the model, but now they're being paid for rescanning it and recreating the model, which already someone has somewhere, and it's just sort of like that back and forth going back on each other, like, could we already think about the application of physical and digital because of all these aspects of, if you build a university, I'm sure the client, which is the university, wants to have access to plans for many reasons, for showing how to rent out offices or bigger areas, right, for events. If you have, a big university like that, I'm sure that is partially an income source for you. And so therefore, how do you share that, that value of those spaces? Do you always do a physical tour around the big university, or could you do a digital? And in that case, if you need access to the digital, why would architects not provide that straight away with the building? I think we're stepping into this realm of technology where those things become more and more obvious, whereas before we were really not even considering that to be one of the.
You have to try quite hard at the moment to do like a physical walkthrough from a 3D model, because a lot of, like, if you go to stay in a hotel, a lot of them have gone around with I can't remember what that camera is called, and they just have, so then you have like a 3D walkthrough that's hosted online, but it's just a series of 3D photos.
Yeah.
The point of like Spatial or any of these open source metaverses is that you're right, we've already got the model. Why would they go around and scan the actual version? I mean, they can do that, but like, it's going to be a lot easier to just use our 3D model and host it on Spatial, for example, and then they can use it for their marketing, and for loads of stuff. For like, if you're renting an Airbnb, you could use it to give people directions, because you could show them, you could say, here it is in like, this is, in an apartment building, it's right at the top. This is the walk up the stairs. The potential for hosting real 3D objects on somewhere where the interface is really easy is the bit of the metaverse that I think is going to be a game changer.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what a fascinating conversation. I actually almost feel like in the last few weeks, I've had a lot of these talks with people that are purely building for the metaverse. I also attended some podcasts with experts, just simply to listen in. And I think that you beautifully tie in the concept behind the usage of, all that sort of accessibility to the technology and what the metaverse can hold as potential for us, but also bring it all down and ground it into what we do as architects.
Yeah, we like building stuff. That's that's why we got into it, right?
Yeah, I see a fascinating application for not only the communication of projects, but also sort of the development of a nice relationship with clients, and sort of like giving them this experience that is unforgettable of your projects and brand. And I think that that's a very powerful way to do business and develop a brand. And so I think, I hope that the listeners also get excited and inspired by this. And thank you, Oli, for joining me. So where do people find you if they wanted to connect?
So ackroydlowrie.com is our website. But what am I mostly on? LinkedIn. Just search my name on LinkedIn. I use that as my main social media. If you go on Instagram, it's just like pictures of me and my mum. So I think LinkedIn to go via it. And I do use it quite a lot, so I'm happy to answer messages and stuff.
Brilliant. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining me and sharing all this story. And I'm wishing you all the best for
Thanks so much, Sarah. Really
following your metaverse journey.
Thank you. And I'm sure I'll catch up very soon.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thanks also for all the listeners. Take care, everyone.